You guys must be eager to go. You're so excited for the last 3 minor prophets. I'm just enjoying my coffee after losing an hour of sleep last night. Well, I won't keep you from your eagerness. You're all excited. Why don't we just jump in? I was talking to Pastor Jim, and we were looking at the timeline of Sunday school, and it's supposed to switch over after Easter to a new session. And I said, there's just no way we're going to get through it before Easter. And he said, that's okay, keep going. And so he said, keep going, but then don't go too long, but then go long enough. And so it's going to be fun. We're going to have a fun time through the New Testament trying to get through in the right time, but it'll be good. Quick overview. So we're in the minor prophets. We're going to be done with the minor prophets this morning. You remember a lot of what we talked about in the minor prophets is we're seeing 3 themes, right? We're seeing the recognition of sin and the call to a higher moral lifestyle. We're seeing the warning of impending judgment if they don't reform. And finally, the future hope of redemption through the Messiah. So that's what we're looking through in the prophets. And we'll finish up with the last 3, the 3 post-exile, post-exilic prophets this morning. But before we do, let's start with the word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we just thank you again that we can be here, that we can study your word, Lord, that you are a good God, that you have revealed yourself in your word, that as we study the Bible, we're not just studying history, we're not just studying dates and names and Bible knowledge, but Lord, we are learning more about who you are, about what you are doing in this world, and about who we are as your people. So Lord, may our hearts and our minds be open to that this morning as we dig in and finish the Old Testament and start to look at the New Testament this morning. So Lord, thank you for this time. Be with us, we pray, in Jesus' name. Amen. So I quickly threw this timeline back in your notes one last time so that we can remember roughly where we are. So we've been going through all the minor prophets, and we are now at the post-exilic prophets. So we are going to look at Haggai, we're going to look at Zechariah, and we're going to look at Malachi this morning. So you see we're towards the end, we're way after the exile in Babylon here. So we start in Haggai, and I like this, rediscovering our spiritual priorities. That is pretty much what the book of Haggai is about. It's all about priorities, all about spiritual priorities, which is why this book is so timeless. I think this is why the women's Sunday school right now is studying the book of Haggai, because it is such a timeless book for us in rediscovering our spiritual priorities. And between you and me, I'm actually kind of glad that they were here last week and not this week, because I know that they would have come and said, yeah, you didn't talk anything about Haggai that we're learning about. We know so much more than you, and I'm glad that they do and can keep that over there. So the summary of book of Haggai is roughly 4 oracles encouraging God's people to rebuild the temple. So I'll throw the author and date up there. So we're looking at Haggai. He's a post-exilic prophet. He's living in Jerusalem. He's a contemporary of Zechariah. So they're actually both in Jerusalem prophesying at the exact same time. So whereas there's been contemporary prophets before where they're prophesying at the same time, they're usually in different locations. Here we actually have 2 prophets that are in the exact same location, pretty much prophesying the exact same thing. Haggai, though, his book is only about 4 months of time, whereas Zechariah's, we'll see, is actually many, many years. So at this point, we're looking at roughly 520 BC. So at this point, you remember the Babylonians have been overthrown by the Persians. King Cyrus of the Persians in 536 is stirred in his heart. The book of Ezra says that God stirred Cyrus's heart to let the people go back to Jerusalem. So he lets the people go back to Jerusalem to rebuild with Zerubbabel, who's their governor, kind of provincial governor there. They go back, and many years later, Ezra goes back with the law, and then years later, Nehemiah comes back to help rebuild the wall after they already started rebuilding the temple. But what happens is they start to rebuild the temple, 536, 535 in that time, and all this opposition comes. Internal opposition from people saying, oh, this isn't worth our time. External opposition from other nations saying, if we let them rebuild, they're going to get strong and they're going to try to overthrow the Persian rule, and we don't want that to happen. So there's all this opposition, and therefore the temple rebuild has just stopped. And for about 16 years here, it's just sat there unfinished. And finally, Haggai and Zechariah come onto the scene 16 years after this decree from Cyrus, and their prophecy is primarily to stir the people up to finish this work that they had started 16 years ago. So that's what we see in the book of Haggai, and then we'll see it again in Zechariah. As for themes in Haggai, three big ones. First, that God's people need to rebuild the temple. Why? As the place of God's presence, but also of their worship. So they're coming back. Remember, they're in exile, they're in Babylon. They've struggled with their identity. They've struggled with, is God still with us? We're not in the promised land. We're not with our temple. Our temple's been destroyed. Is God still with us? And both Haggai and Zechariah are saying, you need to rebuild this temple as a symbolic reminder that God is still with you. And then secondly, they're coming back and they're saying, how do we rightfully worship God after our temple's been destroyed, after we're just a remnant of exiles? How are we going to worship well? And Haggai and Zechariah are reminding them, you need the temple. You need to rebuild the temple in order to have the proper place of worship. So that's the big theme. Second is that their current hardships have stemmed from their failure in this matter. So you'll see it, the book kind of starts off, we'll see it in the next slide, with all these natural disasters that are kind of happening, and Haggai says, a lot of this stuff is happening because you haven't been faithful to doing what the Lord has told you to do. So again, one of the things that is timeless for us here is the consequences of our own sin, right? Here they see the consequences. They aren't faithful to what the Lord has asked them to do, and they see consequences. Same stands true for us today. And then finally, Haggai ends with this glorious future that awaits the people of God, and Zerubbabel through King David's line. So we start to see more and more messianic texts as we get into the post-exilic prophets. As for structure, again, the first 11 verses, we see these droughts, these poor harvests that they were experiencing are a result of their failure to rebuild the temple. So Haggai says, you should start that work up again. They actually respond really favorably. They start building. We get to chapter 2, and Haggai encourages the people to continue the work. He promises that the glory of the new temple would surpass that of the first. Now, we know from the book of Nehemiah that many didn't actually think that was true, right? They built the second temple, and a lot of those who had seen the first temple or had known about it sit there and they cry and they rend their clothes because the second temple isn't as beautiful, in their opinion, as the first. But he promises that God's glory will still be there and it will be beautiful. He further goes on to talk a little bit about proper worship, specifically priestly rules on defilement, and then that God will bless them from this day on. Kind of sets the scene, and then you get to the end of chapter 2 here, and he's speaking specifically to Zerubbabel, their leader, saying, God will be with you. So again, it was the sense of, you haven't built the temple, you should start that up again. That's why you're seeing a lot of this stuff happening around you. So build the temple, continue the work, God's glory is going to be there, and look at this awesome future that's going to happen. That's really the structure, the flow of Haggai. When it comes to reading Haggai, a couple helps. First, read Ezra 1 and 6 alongside. If you want the historical context of what's going on, why Haggai has to come onto the scene, read Ezra 1 through 6. You see a lot of that opposition there. You start to understand why the people, this wasn't laziness, right? It wasn't like they got halfway through the temple and were like, we're tired, we're not going to build anymore. Really, there was all this external and a little bit of internal opposition that you see in Ezra 1 through 6 that kind of shapes the context for why Haggai and Zechariah come onto the scene. Note the distinguishing features. Just as you're reading it, you're going to see these are very distinguishing features for Haggai. There's rhythmic prose. There's all these questions answered by God's word to the people, so a lot of kind of back and forth rhetorical questions that God answers. Careful use of repetition. Remember, whenever you're reading Scripture and things are repeated, that means stop and pay attention. Maybe write it down. He repeats himself a lot, and that's the important stuff. And then see the connection between the first and the third and the second and the fourth words here. So if you remember back in the structure, first and the third, So again, rebuild the temple in order to experience God's blessing. And then the second and the fourth is that God has this future promise of glory. So you'll see those together. Third, remember how important the temple was for the identity of the people, right? We read it and we go, well, what's the big deal? It's just a temple. Well, for them, this was everything. This was not only their place of worship, but this was the place where God's presence was literally with them on earth. So to not have it was to not have God's presence with them. So this wasn't just an aesthetic thing. This wasn't just hey, it would be really nice to have a place to worship at kind of thing. This was an identity. This was an identity issue. This was an issue of whether or not they could see that God was still with them. Fourth is he gives a couple of specific dates in the letter, which is kind of unique. And one of the things to note is that the dates that he gives are actually seasons of slow harvest. And the reason he does that is to kind of, as he's talking to the people and he's going through the timing here, he's kind of saying, hey, you have nothing better to be doing right now than to be rebuilding the temple, right? You have no excuse to give me that, I just don't have enough time. We're so busy with the temple or with the harvest. He's saying, no, look at the time of year it is. These are slow harvest times. You should be rebuilding the temple. And then finally, note again the tension. We see this all over in the prophets, the tension between the present realities and the future glory, right? He's saying, rebuild this temple and you're going to see glory. And they're looking around and going, this temple isn't really that nice, and we're still under foreign control, and I don't see this future glory. I don't see this future Davidic king who's going to come and save us from our plight. And so, again, even in the book of Haggai, you feel this kind of back and forth tension between what's really going on and what he's promising is going to happen in the future. All right, questions on Haggai? And I'm only half joking. If you really have more questions on Haggai, go ask any of the women who are over in the women's class right now, and they'll be able to give you all the details of it. All right, well, with Haggai comes the book of Zechariah. Again, they're contemporaries, they're at the same time. A good summary of Zechariah are visions aimed at encouraging the post-exilic community, especially the leadership. Again, focusing on rebuilding the temple. There's also oracles about the future coming king. And here's where it starts to get really specific, who would be slain and eventually triumph, right? This isn't just a vague Messiah. Now there's some more specific prophecies coming. Again, when it comes to the author, we have Zechariah, again, a post-exilic prophet. He's in Jerusalem. He's with Haggai. As opposed to Haggai's prophecy, his ministry was about 4 months. Zechariah is for many years. We're talking 520 into the early 400s. And when I say early 400s, we're working backwards, so I'm talking 490, 480, not 410, 420. Zechariah was actually from a family of priests. He was a visionary, so he had these visions from God. And it's important to kind of know that, because whereas Haggai is much more practical, right? Hey, rebuild the temple so you can worship, so you can have God's presence. Zechariah is much more priestly. It's much more about the relationship between the people and God that happens at the temple. Something I'll quickly note, I've done this with other books, is that some scholars think that the last 5 chapters of Zechariah, chapters 9 through 14, are written by someone else. That's because when you turn there, you see there's a shift again in tone, there's a shift in genre. It goes from these visions that are explained to more apocalyptic visions that are symbolic, that don't have explanation. Again, there's different content, different language, and a lot of people say that it couldn't be him because there's no mention of his name in those chapters. I won't get into it. I will say it doesn't really matter, and what I mean by that, again, I don't say it to be flippant. I say it that when you're reading it, you see that the basic concerns of the book of Zechariah are in both sections. So whether it was one author or two, it doesn't matter, because the arc of what's happening here is the same, the themes are the same, the concerns are the same, which include these. Again, God is with the remnant community of the people who have returned from exile, right? So the temple represents that God is with them. Second, that God will prosper their leaders, right? They're under Persian power. Zechariah kind of comes and says, God is not only going to be with you, he's actually going to prosper you. I know that doesn't seem possible because you're not independent, you're not autonomous right now, but God has a plan, and it is to prosper you through your leaders. Third is that the future of Jerusalem and Judah is bright. It's full of peace and glory. Again, we're feeling again that tension between the present realities and the future hope. Fourth, and this is where it starts to get again more specific, Israel's king will come back to Jerusalem in triumph, but he's going to be slain for the sins of the people. And finally, God will punish his people's enemies, yet many of them will come to know the Lord. We're starting to see God's plan of redemption going outside of just God's people and into the other nations. Again, they won't escape judgment, but they also aren't outside of salvation. So it'll be a little bit of both and. So these basic concerns that we see in both of these sections of Zechariah include judgment and salvation for both Judah and the nations, and also the rebuilding of the temple as a sign of God's presence, and finally the nation's leaders and how they relate to God. The structure, again, two main sections. We start with chapters 1 through 8, and we have call to repentance in the beginning, and then it turns to these 8 night visions, and night visions, they just happen at night, these 8 visions that are interpreted by an angel, and they're centered on the 4th and the 5th visions, which you find in chapters 3 and 4. And we'll kind of show why they're centered on those in a second. But you have these 8 visions. And again, the structure, and again, I'm getting ahead of myself, but the structure is that Zechariah has this vision. An angel appears to him and says, hey, what did you see? He says, this is what I saw. What does it mean? And the angel turns to him and says, this is what it means. So it's not apocalyptic in that we have to use symbols to figure out what's going on. They are interpreted by the angel that's with Zechariah. And then finally in chapters 7 and 8, we turn kind of on a hinge here to questions about fasting, more about what is the true nature of fasting. God turns to announce future blessing on Jerusalem. Again, with the temple being rebuilt, there's going to be future blessing, future glory coming back to the promised land there. And then when you get to this second section, chapters 9 through 14, you have primarily 2 oracles, right? You have 2 visions. 9 through 11 is this vision of judgment against the nations in context of their rejection of the coming kingly Messiah and the regathering of the scattered people. So if I can say it simply, that is more of the immediate future vision. This is immediately going to happen soon. That there's going to be judgment on the nations because they've rejected the Messiah. But in that process, God is going to gather the people who are scattered. And then the second oracle is that same theme about judgment coming on the rejection of the Messiah, but focusing on that day, right? We've talked about the day of the Lord. The day of the Lord is that day of judgment that's coming when God comes to redeem and to restore the world to the way it was at creation. But it's also a day of judgment. So the same theme is that judgment will come on that day with that final defeat of God's enemies and his establishment of the universal kingdom when all nations will come to worship him. So again, you have these 2 oracles. They both have to do with the triumphal intervention of the Lord in the affairs of Judah and the nations, right? The Messiah is coming, God is coming, and he will actually do something in their midst, but that Messiah is going to be rejected, and because of that, there will be judgment, both immediately and in the end. So when it comes, again, to some help for reading the book of Zechariah, one of the things we see in Zechariah is that all of those threefold themes of prophetic literature show up in Zechariah. So you have the warning of sin, or the awareness of sin. You have the warning of judgment, and you also have great future hope in the book of Zechariah, stressing this coming kingly Messiah. Second, and this is what I was alluding to, the visions in the first chunk there are actually chiastic. So you remember, if you forgot what when we use the word chiasm is a structure where the first and the last thing are similar, the second and the second last thing are similar, and then it goes in like that into, I like to think of it like a sandwich, maybe because I'm always hungry, but it goes into a sandwich, and whatever the meat of the sandwich is right in the middle is the most important thing. That's what the author is trying to stress. So we see here that the visions 1 and 8 are about the 4 groups of colored horses whose purpose is to go through the whole earth. And it's primarily jumping off the theme of rebuilding the temple. And that these will go out into the whole earth. Then you have visions 2 and 3 and 6 and 7 that are describing obstacles facing the restoration community and its building of the temple. So you kind of are working your way in. And then again, visions 4 and 5 are the centerpiece. This is chapters 3 and chapters 4 of the book of Zechariah. These are the centerpiece. They're specifically dealing with Joshua and Zerubbabel's leadership. Zechariah 3 is one of my favorite passages in all of Scripture. Zechariah 3 is this awesome vision of the priest Joshua who's standing before the throne of God, and Satan is next to him, and he's just accusing Joshua, right? So we know Satan is the accuser of the brethren. This is his job, right? This is what he does. He stands there and he looks at God's people and he says, they're not worthy, they're not good enough, how could you possibly love them? He's accusing Joshua here, and Joshua's standing there in filthy rags. I mean, he has nothing to kind of argue Satan's claims. He's standing there, and he, as the priest, is representative of the whole people of God. So he's standing there, and Satan's going, these are your people, God. Look at them. They're a mess. They're covered in filthy rags. And I love it because in this vision, God says, Satan, be quiet. And he has an angel go, and he has an angel put clean robes on his people, and he says, these are my people. These are who I love. I'm going to make them pure. I'm going to make them clean. And it's this amazing picture of the gospel in the Old Testament. And it's this awesome, amazing picture. I think we don't get too many behind the scenes of what is happening with Satan, right? We tend to not think about Satan's presence in our lives, and I love it because it's reminding us what Satan's doing, right? Every time we go to God, Satan's standing there going, God, look at this guy. He's a mess, right? Look at this lady. She's a mess. And God's saying, Satan, enough of that. I've put clean clothes on them. I've made them new. I've redeemed them with the blood of my Son. So it's stressing there. And then the chapter 4, that 5th vision, is a similar kind of bringing Zerubbabel up and saying, look, he's going to have strong leadership again with God's presence, with God's help in his life. I just love that. I love that chapter 3 of Zechariah. I really do. And then finally, just note he knows and he uses a lot of the former prophets' language and imagery. So as you're reading Zechariah, you're going to see a lot of the same themes, a lot of the same images come up from former prophets. So keep that in mind. Okay, any questions, Zechariah? Again, Zechariah, Haggai, same time, same overall theme, rebuild the temple, for God's presence to be with you, for proper worship, because they're trying to kind of get back to being the people of God. They're trying to remember who they are, this exiled remnant who's coming back. God has been faithful to the people to bring them back, but they're trying to remember who they are and figure it out. Okay. We then get to the final book of the Old Testament, last minor prophet, book of Malachi. Once had a pastor was using a sermon illustration. He said he had some guy who was coming to preach out of the book of Malachi. He had never done that before. He didn't even really know the book of Malachi, and he got up front and he said, "Okay, today we're going to be in the great Italian prophet, the book of Malachi, this morning." And so whenever I think of Malachi, I always think of Malachi. No, book of Malachi, not Italian at all. Very simply put, book of Malachi, 6 disputes with God's people, between God and his people, and Yahweh warning them of future judgments and promising redemption to the faithful. So it's really this book of disputes. It's kind of, the people have a claim against God, and God says, no, that doesn't hold weight. And then they have another claim, and no, that doesn't hold weight. It's really this back and forth where God is warning them of judgment if they don't come back to him, but also reminding them of the future promises that he has in store for them if they're faithful. The author, a guy by the name of Malachi, or at least we think. We don't know much about Malachi. His name means my messenger. So a lot of people say this could be a pen name. Again, doesn't matter. Book of Malachi, his name means my messenger. He very much is the messenger of God here. And he probably wrote around 460. It could have been between 460 and 430. This is either before Nehemiah becomes governor or during his absence later on. And just, again, to situate ourselves, is about 80 years after Haggai and Zechariah. So Haggai and Zechariah come, say, rebuild the temple. That's in 520. In 516, the temple finally does get rebuilt. Nehemiah comes back with a second group of exiles, and he rebuilds the wall. And Malachi is right around this time, a little bit after that time. The people are back in the Promised Land. They have their temple rebuilt. They have their wall rebuilt. They're kind of settling back into what does it mean to be an independent people, even though they're still under Persian rule. Remember, the Persians were a lot more lax in their rule. Assyrians had to mix everybody up and kind of confuse their identity. The Babylonians would just crush you and then take you away. The Persians want you to be happy so that you don't revolt, so they kind of let them go back. So there's not a whole lot of pressure on them, so they're trying to figure out who are we going to be? What does it mean to worship God again as the people of God in the land that God has given them? But again, it's been 80 years. It's been 80 years since Haggai and Zechariah. So remember, we just looked at all those messianic prophecies in Haggai and Zechariah, and they're pumped. Right? The people are hearing it, and they're going, yes, redemption is coming. The kingly Messiah is coming. He's going to overthrow the people who are over us. This is great. And then 80 years passes, and I don't know about you, if something doesn't come true within about 2 weeks, I'm pretty bummed out. Well, 80 years have passed, and the people are sitting here and going, God, I'm just not seeing it. I'm not seeing it, God. And so they have started to feel like God didn't really care about them anymore. They're starting to feel like God maybe wasn't actually going to be true to his promises. And as a result, their worship had become incredibly casual, had become incredibly apathetic, and the standards that God had set for them had become kind of just, not that important to them. So in the book of Malachi, we see these themes. We see that God is a covenant-keeping God and requires the same of his people. We'll see where that comes up when we look at the structure. Second is that God's people show disdain for him by their apathy and their moral and religious decline. So it's not like the point, and again, we'll see this when we turn to the next slide, that if we are apathetic in our worship and in our relationship with God, it's not just like God says, we used to be best friends, but now we're just kind of like friends. We check in on Facebook every couple years kind of thing. God says if you are apathetic in your worship to me, it actually shows that you don't love me. That's kind of the problem here in the book of Malachi, is they are feeling like God doesn't love them, and he's turning around and saying, you're not showing that you love me either. And then finally is this theme that God will judge his people in justice for their half-hearted obedience. So the book of Malachi really is this call for God's people to come back to him fully and trust in him, even when his promises are taking a while, even when you're not feeling it, when they're not feeling it in their lives. So the structure is 2 sets of 3. So there's these 6 disputes, and they're in 2 sets of 3. All stemming from the same root, which is that this is a time of spiritual disillusionment, and Israel has grown weary of Yahweh and of keeping his covenant. So they're just tired. They're just, I don't know if we really need to go through this. So there's 2 sets of 3 here. The first set is this complaint to God that God doesn't love them anymore. Right? You just don't. Where's this Messiah, God? Where's your promises? We don't really feel like you love us anymore. We're still under Persian rule. We still don't see the glory of the temple that you've promised us. We're still not seeing your king on his throne. And God turns it around on them and says, actually, you don't have any room to talk about me not loving you because you have shown that you don't love me in abandoning me and being apathetic in your worship. It then turns in chapter 2:17 into the beginning of chapter 4, that again, twice, Yahweh takes up their complaint that he has done nothing about evil and injustice. So they take it a step further and say, not only do you not love us, but you actually don't care about evil and injustice. You're just letting it happen. Look, God, it's all over the place. You don't care. And he actually says, it's actually good that I'm not doing anything about evil and injustice right now, because if you look at yourselves, you'd be in that camp. You would be part of that judgment. So his point in that is he kind of turns it around on them and says, yes, I am doing something about evil and injustice. I will come to judge it. But maybe take a look in the mirror and make sure you're not on the wrong side of that judgment right now. Right? Again, you're being apathetic. You're not fighting for justice as I've called you to. And therefore, you are actually going to be found on the other side of that. And then finally, there's this conclusion, the last couple verses of chapter 4, where he talks about Moses and he talks about Elijah. And again, you read it and you go, I'm not really sure why, but again, he's kind of summing up the law and the prophets here. And we know that when we get into the New Testament, when we get to the Transfiguration, and Jesus is on the Mount of Transfiguration, and he meets with Moses and he meets with Elijah, that it is this kind of, he is with the law and the prophets. He's with the whole of the Old Testament word up there. And here Malachi is kind of tying a nice little bow on the whole of the Old Testament here by saying that God's messenger is coming to prepare the way, speaking of John the Baptist, coming to prepare the way for the coming Messiah, and the law and the prophets are all alluding to that. That's where this has all been going. So the book of Malachi really does kind of end us in a good spot to get us kind of whet our appetites for what's coming in the New Testament. Much of the book of Malachi, as you read it, is this back and forth between God's reassurance of his love for them, followed by rebukes to come back to the covenantal agreement, which binds them together, right? So in many ways, I kind of look at the book of Malachi, and I know this, again, don't quote me on this, but if it's helpful, use it. If it's not, immediately forget it. I kind of see it as like this is what happens when you've been married for a while and you're starting to like, your spouse is changing, and you're like, okay, I know I'm supposed to love who my spouse is becoming, and you're starting to, and so one spouse is coming and saying, I just don't feel like you love me, and the other spouse is saying, of course I love you, look at all the stuff I've done for you, I don't feel like you love me, and it's kind of this wrestling with the relationship has grown stale in some ways, right? So God's people, the relationship that God's people have to him has grown stale because they don't feel like he's fulfilling his promises. And God is saying, I've always loved you. I'm still fulfilling my promises, even if it's taking a little bit longer than you might like. So it's this back and forth of reassurance of his love while saying, you need to stay connected in the covenant that we have put together too, so that you show your love and your commitment to me as well. Again, stressing that the day of the Lord is coming, and they don't want to be on the wrong side of it. So, a couple helps for reading the book of Malachi. Remember the time. Again, remember where we are. Remember in history. They're settled into the land. Things are going a little bit better, but they're just feeling like nothing is happening right now. And also, most of the sins that are called out in Malachi, if you go back into Ezra and Nehemiah, you'll see that those are the same sins that are happening during that time. It's marrying outside of God's people. It's idolatry. It's spiritual apathy. It's injustice. It's stuff like that. You'll see that this isn't different than what we read in Ezra and Nehemiah. Again, notice that each dispute has a cycle. So it starts with a declaration, right? So the issue announced by Yahweh, right? You feel like I don't love you. And then it turns to the people's question, so you feel that I don't love you, but I really do, and you're not loving me. And the people kind of respond with a, how so, God, right? What do you mean we don't love you? And then finally Yahweh's response, either reminding them of his past, so I've loved you because look at all the things I've always done for you, or coming actions revealing their actions that show contempt. So I love you, you're not loving me. Well, how so? How are you showing that you love us? Remember my faithfulness. Remember Egypt. Remember the Exodus. Remember King David. Remember all the times I've been faithful to you. There's a great section in Malachi of remember that you are Jacob and not Esau, right? Where Pastor Scott's been preaching on that through Genesis there. Remember that you are my chosen people. So there's a covenant, I'm going to love you no matter what. And then he turns it on his head and says, okay, but as much as I'm reminding you of my past actions showing that love, let me also reveal how you are not showing your love to me. And then finally, see the progression of the disputes. And what I mean by that is, again, it starts with God, you don't love us, to God kind of turning it around on them saying, well, you actually don't love me, and it's way worse than what you feel like is my fault here. So it kind of progresses in each of these disputes, and it ends here with the end of Malachi with this messenger who will declare the Messiah is coming. So it's kind of these back and forths. I don't feel like you love me. I do love you. You're not actually showing you are loving me through your actions, all this stuff. And finally, he ends at the end of Malachi by saying, but I've got really good news. I'm going to send this messenger. He's going to prepare the way of the Lord. The Messiah is coming, and you're going to see my love on display. And that's where we kind of kicks us off into the New Testament. So, book of Malachi, really quickly. Any questions on Malachi? Okay. We're going to do two things before we close today. First, we're going to briefly look at what happens in the 400 years between the book of Malachi and the first gospel, right? Because there's 400 years, and I don't know about you, but if you ever read the Bible from front to cover and you're reading and you finish Malachi and you're saying, okay, we're talking about priests, we're talking about sacrifices, we're talking about Jewish worship, we're talking about the Persians, and then you turn the page and all of a sudden you have Roman governors and you have this great empire, and there's all this extensive travel and common language and all this stuff, and you're going, I'm in a completely different world. Well, 400 years have passed. It is a completely different world. So we need to kind of take a minute to look just briefly at what's going on in order to set us up for what we're going to see in the New Testament. So remember, we went through the 9 main eras of the Old Testament. This is Max Anders. We've gone through all of these, but we didn't hit the last one, which is silence. This is Max Anders' silence era. There's no books of the Bible that talk about that. That's the whole point. The silence era is when God's word was silent. He was not revealing his word to his people, so there's no books. Anders defines it like this: Pharisees and others entomb the Israelites in legalism for the next 400 years. Well, that doesn't just immediately happen. It's not like you finish the book of Malachi and the next day here come Pharisees to bring about legalism. There's some things that kind of necessitate, I won't say necessitate, but kind of make that happen. It's important that we see that. So there's 4 main subjects in this silence era that are important for us to note. First is what Anders calls the changing guard, or the march of the nations. So we've gone from Persian rule, right? So we remember, we're reading the book of Daniel, and the writing's on the wall, and here comes the Persians, and the Persians come and they overthrow the Babylonians. We have Cyrus's decree. The Persians are in control. This is about 540, 536 is Cyrus's decree. The Persians are in control. That only lasts till about 333. So about 200 years, the Persians are in control. Then, guy that we all learned about in school, Alexander the Great, comes on the scene. There's a reason why he's called Alexander the Great. It's because he took over the whole known world. So he comes in around 333, and he overthrows the Persian rule in the ancient Near East here. So Alexander the Great comes in, overthrows political power. Now he's in charge of all the Jews, right? They're not autonomous. Now the Greeks are in charge. Well, when Alexander the Great dies, he has 4 generals, and he splits his kingdom between his 4 generals. So it's a little fractured, but it's still fairly strong. And as a result, Greek culture just completely infiltrates and permeates that whole land, to the point where when we get to the New Testament, Greek culture is everywhere. Even though the Romans are now kind of in control, Greek culture is what's kind of taken over that area. So Greek culture is the main thing that we are now kind of shifting in the Jewish culture. They're kind of wrestling with how are we going to be Jewish even though all the Greek culture is kind of taken over. Even though the Romans come in about 150, 146 BC, so then another 200 years after that, the Romans come and overthrow the Greeks. Now they're in control of the area. So 400 years have passed. There's a lot of moving parts politically what's happening. Part of that is we see in the books, I forgot to mention it. So there's no books of the Bible that talk about the silence era unless you go and read from what's called the Apocrypha. The Apocrypha, you can find it in the Catholic Bible. You can find it outside the Catholic Bible. It is books that were written during this time that those who canonized the Scripture, as we have it today, determined these were not scriptural. I don't have time to go into what made them decide what was and wasn't Scripture. Pretty much they compared them and they said, these are not talking about the same themes. These are not redemptive history. This was a lot more just like straight history. Some of them have fanciful and kind of made-up stories. So they're not scriptural, but they are historical, and they help us to kind of get a snapshot into what's going on here. In some of that, you have the books of 1st, 2nd Maccabees, where we learn about these political sects that rise up in the Jewish people. So what's happening is as the Persians are coming, and they're kind of being a thorn in the side, and then the Greeks come, and then the Romans come, these political sects keep rising up, and they keep trying to stir the people up to stage a revolt. Right? So the Maccabees come and they say, we're going to go overthrow the Persians. Come on, everybody, let's go overthrow. Doesn't work. Zealots do the same thing. Doesn't work. Why it's important to note them is because this is setting the scene for the New Testament. The people of God want to overthrow the political powers that are over them, to the point where they're willing to sacrifice themselves pretty much. They're willing to kind of suicide mission and raise up people against these great foreign powers against them in order to overthrow it. So there's this unrest of we're sick of being under a foreign thumb. We really want to overthrow the powers that are over us. So you're starting to see political unrest. You're starting to see we really need to do something about these foreign nations. Third, other than the political sects, we also see religious sects. This is where the Pharisees and the Sadducees come on the scene. So again, backstep what we just talked about in the book of Malachi. Book of Malachi, worship is apathetic. Their commitment to God was a little lax. It wasn't that important. All this stuff. God's saying, come back to me, stay in this covenant, and you have the pendulum swinging with the Pharisees and the Sadducees who come and they say, well, if God's upset that we're being apathetic, let's be super legalistic. And they swing the pendulum the other way and they say, God needs us to fulfill every law, and but if I get too close, then I won't do that, so let's put up a new law around that law, and let's put up a new law around that law, and you have more and more laws being added to the law of God to the point where it's impossible to even fulfill God's law anymore. But the religion of that day had become very legalistic. It had become very external. So just do and say and act the right way, and that's good enough. And it doesn't really matter what's on the inside. It doesn't really matter what your heart feels. It doesn't really matter what you're thinking. Just look, act, and say all the right things, and it'll be good. So these two religious parties are actually not true spirituality, neither of which were particularly helpful for the Jewish people, but it was all that was there. And it was this reaction, this really strong reaction to the apathy that we were just seeing in the book of Malachi. The Pharisees are the more orthodox, the more conservative. They're the ones who want to break away from culture, right? We got to put laws on laws in order that we don't get our hands dirty doing anything that God would be unhappy with. The Sadducees are a little bit more liberal in that they're more wealthy, they're more of the powerful, so they're the spirituality of the wealthy, so it's kind of like, oh, God's going to bless us, and we just need to do the right thing, and God will keep blessing us financially and in power and all that. And then they come together, and they actually create the Sanhedrin. We remember the Sanhedrin in the story of Jesus going to the cross and going through trial. The Sanhedrin is this ruling board made up of both religious parties who can't ever get along with each other because they're actually completely, really different from each other. The only thing that they care about is having religious freedom. So you have political parties that want political freedom, you have religious parties that want religious freedom, and this is what happens. Everybody is so desperate for freedom after hearing all the messianic promises that the messianic hopes and the expectation of a Savior during this time is so palpably high. They're just looking everywhere. If you read through the Apocrypha, it's such and such a person rose up and he was the Savior, he was the Messiah, and such a person rose up and he was the Messiah, but then he died. And then so-and-so rose up and he was the Messiah, but he died. And so every time a Messiah dies, you know he can't possibly be the Messiah. Which is why when we get to the story of Jesus and he dies, everyone goes, okay, back to what we were doing, right? This wasn't him, until Easter Sunday. This expectation is so high, and not only is it so high, but it spreads really fast because of the Roman rule, right? So there's a common language, so everyone can speak this really easily to each other. You're not having to go through translation. Common language, messianic hope spreads easily. You also have military peace from the Pax Romana. You also have extensive sea travel now. So all this stuff, you have a common government, you have all these things that are put in place that make news spread really easily. So the second you have rumors of a Messiah, it is spreading. It is spreading. It is spreading. And so it's so high. Everyone is waiting for that Messiah. Who's it going to be? There he is. No, he's killed. No, there he is. No, he's killed. And so when Jesus comes on the scene, that's why he can be up in Galilee, and all of a sudden in Jerusalem they know what's going on. Even though there's no mail system, there's no email, there's no internet. It happens quickly because of the stuff that's happening in the Roman Empire. And finally, the Jews are suffering such persecution at the hands of all these political powers that this widespread hope and expectation of a Savior came to exist. So there's this palpable messianic hope, but again, it's primarily political, which is why when you get to the Gospels, everybody wants Jesus to be their political Savior, and that's just not who he is. So that's what's happening in this 400 years in between the Testaments, and kind of sets us up for why the New Testament is the way it is. As we close here in the final minute or two, let me just quickly overview the New Testament, and I say quickly, you guys know this. I made a huge typo. You're going to fire me from this class. So there's 27 books. They're written over about 50 years. They're describing about 100 years of history. There's 4 Gospels. There's also a book of Acts that I forgot to put in there. Don't fire me. I do know the book of Acts exists. I just forgot to put it up there. 4 Gospels, book of Acts. There's 13 letters written by Paul. There's 8 letters written by other people. And then you have the book of Revelation. And primarily the New Testament is shifting from focusing on the nation of Israel to focusing on Jesus, the formation and the expansion of his church. Again, nothing groundbreaking. I know you guys know that, but it's important to think about that as we are turning to the New Testament. A couple quick kind of foundational things that will set us up well next week when we jump in to the Gospels. First, here's a timeline roughly of the books of the New Testament. So you have the Gospels that are taking place during those 30 years. You have the book of Acts, which is taking place in the next 30 years, and then you have all these letters that are written, some during the book time of Acts, some after. You have John's letters happen way later, around 90 A.D. But again, as opposed to the Old Testament, we're talking 2,000 years of history written out, and really, right now you have 100 years, all one spot, then it kind of branches out. So kind of to keep in mind there. Quick geography, and again, keep these notes and mark them up and do what you need to do. Geography, really important. Know 4 bodies of water in the New Testament. Sea of Galilee up north, right? A lot of stories, a lot of parables, a lot of events with Jesus' ministry happen in the Sea of Galilee. Dead Sea down south, connected right down the middle by the Jordan River. That's where he's baptized. That's where a lot of events happen too. And then obviously we know the Mediterranean Sea is off to the east there. Some places to note. Again, you don't have to memorize all this. This is why I'm hopefully giving you this map. Galilee up north. A lot of Jesus' ministry is up north in Galilee. We have Samaria, which is just south of it. Remember, Samaria is the old kingdom of Israel. It's where the Assyrians had come in and sent Assyrians to mix with the identity of the Jewish people. So you have these Samaritans who are not purebred Jews, and therefore they're not loved and respected by the Jewish people. So you have Samaria. We have Perea, which is over on the west side of the Jordan River right there. We have Nazareth, which is up north. I know it's hard to see up there and maybe even hard to see in your notes, but Nazareth is up north, right in the southern kind of tip of the Sea of Galilee. Capernaum is way up north on the top of the Sea of Galilee. Jerusalem down south, right at the top of the Dead Sea. Bethlehem is right underneath it, where Jesus is born. And obviously the land of Judea is down south. Okay. Last thing, and then we'll close. Well, actually, 2 quick things. Wow, there's a lot of stuff up there. This is primarily, once we get to the book of Acts, this map will be helpful. maybe I won't go into all this right now, and I'll bring it back up for the book of Acts. But when we get in the book of Acts, a lot of these places are important. Antioch's the first church. It's over here in Syria. Obviously, Rome is where, and Italy is where Paul eventually gets imprisoned. Greece is the big thing in the middle. We have Asia, which is where the letters of book of Revelation are written to. There's Galatia, other places. I won't go into all that right now, save time, but we'll come back to that map. Anders gives us 3 New Testament eras. This is my final slide. 3 New Testament eras. So we had 9 Old Testament. We have 3 New Testament eras. We have the era of the Gospels, life of Jesus of Nazareth, mainly happening in Palestine there. We have the era of the church, which is the formation of the Christian church. This is primarily happening in Jerusalem. This is primarily through Peter. And then we have the missions era, which is the expansion of the church into the Roman Empire through missions, mainly in the Roman Empire and mainly through Paul, who we know well. So these are our 3 eras. We'll go through these in the next couple weeks. We'll obviously get through the Gospels next week. We might dip our toes a little bit into these other eras in the book of Acts as well. Whew. Fire hose, New Testament intro. Now you guys know everything about the New Testament. We'll jump in to the Gospels next week. Hey, we did it. We made it through the Old Testament. Pat yourselves on the back for that. Whew. We'll get through the New Testament, and that'll be that. Let me say a word of prayer, and we'll close. Lord, thank you that you are good. Thank you again for the reminders in these prophets that, Lord, that sometimes the way the world is does not look the way that your Bible promises, that the Word promises it will be. And as a result, we have to wrestle with what does it mean to be already in the kingdom but not yet in the fulfillment of the kingdom. And Lord, in that time, we know we have to trust you. We need to rely on you. We can trust you because we look back at what we just studied in the Old Testament. We see you have been faithful time and time and time again to your people. As we get to the New Testament, we'll see you are faithful to your people time and time again. So we know we can trust you. We know that you love us. Lord, help us to love you back in this covenant. Thank you for the new covenant in Jesus that we'll learn about in the New Testament. Thank you for his work on the cross that has afforded us salvation. And thank you, Lord, that we now have we still have a role to play in your kingdom. Help us to be faithful to that role. Help us to love to share your good news with those around us. Be with us this week as we do that. In Christ's name, amen. Thank you, guys.